Welcome to MakeCAPApps, DiffPair Properties Part 1, a BorntoRoute MakeCAP app for capture users. BorntoRoute is proud to be a Cadence Connections partner. MakeCAPApps are available online at www.BorntoRoute.com. And please watch more of our movies on the BorntoRoute YouTube channel. In our earlier movies, we used MakeCAPApps, define DiffPairs to create DiffPair objects. And in this movie, we're going to see how to assign property values for the DiffPairs using DiffPair properties. I'm going to open up that screen. I've got MakeCAPApps and Sidecar set to retract to the side. They're unpinned. You can see several things on this display. The first is that all the DiffPair properties, which in Constraint Manager some reside in electrical worksheets, some in physical worksheets, are all organized in a single screen for you to fill out and apply to DiffPair objects. And secondly, you can see the graphical VISUEYES display that will draw the differential pair as you build it, as you create the property values. So let's take a look at the property value form. Property value form is organized into 3 rows. The first row is the primary values. So let's put in some values. We're defaulted to mils, which will be picked up by all the fields. We can set up any units that we want. And we're going to set up for the minimum line width, 10 mils, and then I'm going to tab over and set up a primary gap also of 10 mils. And you can see that the initial primary width and primary gap of the DiffPair is being built and shown. The next field we're going to fill in is the differential minimum space. This replaces wire-to-wire spacing between the wires and the DiffPair to make sure it can be fabricated and etched and isn't too small. So that's now shown, and we're going to set the gather control as to whether to include or ignore the gather distance in the uncoupled length. We're just going to set it to ignore. Then we're going to tab down to the neck and coupling row. So now we're going to set the alternate width and gap, the neck width and neck gap, and I'll just set those to 6. And so you can see now the primary width, primary gap, the minimum spacing between the wires and the DiffPair, the smaller neck width and the smaller neck gap. And now we can set up the range for what's considered the coupling range. And this is computed based on the primary gap. So we're going to say that it's considered coupled if it is 5 mils less. And we're going to say it's considered coupled if it's 30 mils more. And there's our range, so that when Constraint Manager and Allegro compute the differential uncoupled length, any separation further apart than this or closer together than this would be considered uncoupled, and this is based again on the primary gap. The last row sets the matching and phase tolerances and uncoupled length specs. So we have a static phase tolerance. We'll put in 10. This could also be in time units, nanoseconds as well, and of course metric. The dynamic phase tolerance to compute the out of phase along the path. The maximum out of phase length that's allowed for dynamic phase. And finally, the maximum uncoupled length that's computed based on if the wires are outside the coupling range. We'll put in 200 there. And so now we've created all the information we need, and we can apply some of these properties or all of these properties to some or all of our differential pair objects. In the VISUEYES display, we can zoom in and zoom out. So if we had a very large coupled plus of, say, 100 mils, and it grew outside the range, we can either zoom out or we can do a show full window. So we can get a picture of this and then come back in and zoom back in to take a look at our DiffPair. So the VISUEYES display is to confirm and give you graphic feedback that the property values you're putting in are creating the differential pair geometry that you want. Lastly, there are error conditions having to do with the differential minimum space, which we set at 4 mils. If we set the differential minus to 7 mils, so that from the gap of 10 minus 7 we would have 3, then the VISUEYES display will show you an error condition. Similarly, when you go to save and apply these, MakeCAPApps will not allow you to save with this kind of an error condition, so we'll put this back to 5. And now if we had the differential gap at 3, less than the minimum space, that's also an error condition shown on this part of the VISUEYES display. So please join us in part 2 of differential pair properties, where we can see how to select the DiffPair objects that we're going to apply the properties to. In this case, we have 4 DiffPairs defined in Capture and 4 in Constraint Manager that we don't have in Capture yet, but which we can see in MakeCAP in your Capture desktop using the MakeCAPApps enhanced view, reading the BRD and Constraint Manager files directly. So these are DiffPairs in Constraint Manager. And where we can see constraint sets with different values by layer that have been applied to your nets, but that exist in Constraint Manager only and brought to your desktop through MakeCAPApps enhanced view. Here we can see different values for DiffPair gap by layer, not normally visible to you in the Capture desktop.